thanks everybody for your time. I know your time is very valuable and precious. That's actually one of the things we're going to talk about today is what do you do with your precious time? How do you get it all done? And so Kanban, I call this Kanban, Kanban for me, or I think I said Kanban for you. I can't remember exactly what person I put it in, but basically, you know, you can learn about Kanban in a way that's like, here, this is something you use, this is something that's out there. But I want to direct this as like how you can use this as a tool in the work that you do. If you're like me, you're not doing just one thing. So the days of like having one project that I'm leading and nothing else that I'm doing, even if you have one project at work, you probably have other things outside of work, other like competing demands on your life and things that you have to do and obligations that you have. So I truly think this is something to use for you personally and professionally. So my expected outcomes for this are for you to know what a Kanban board is and how to use it, appreciation for the Kanban method, a motivation to use a Kanban board to manage tasks and to get lots of stuff done. So, you know, this webinar is really about you and how you can use one of the most popular methods of Agile. I believe Scrum is the most popular, but this is definitely up there. In fact, Scrum, if you're familiar with the Scrum board or the task board, it actually comes from Kanban. It is a Kanban board. So a lot of times people think of the Kanban board as being actually part of Scrum. It's a tool that actually came from Kanban method. So I'm going to share my secrets from running my business. I have a consulting business that I've had since 2010. I work at multiple universities, a total of 4, although I don't teach classes all the time for all of them. One of the universities, I just teach certification courses. The other 3 universities, I have 1, 2, or 6 classes a year at those different universities that I teach. And I also do consulting work as part of my work for my business, and I teach certification courses. So I have a very, very busy life, and I just came from a meeting that I cut short, a training class that I go to weekly, to be here now. So just that's like a normal day for me. So my hope here is that you get the most out of your day and your week by delivering value with an amazing tool that's easy to use. Okay, so I'm going to start by talking about what is Agile. Agile is a set of principles that guide teams. A lot of times people think of Agile as a particular method, and it is not that. So don't get into that space. I actually do a presentation on busting the myths of Agile, and I believe that's in the library that Susan was talking about. If you go to the Great IT Professional and just type in my name, you'll see all of my previous presentations. And if you have a membership, you can go ahead and watch those. Great way to get PDUs if you don't have them. Anyway, so in my list of myths that I bust about Agile, one is that Agile is a particular method. So I talk to people and they'll say, oh, I do Agile. And I say, oh, great. What method do you use? And they're like, Agile. I'm like, no, Agile is a set of principles and practices. It's not a specific method. Also, oftentimes people think of Scrum as being Agile. Scrum is only one method of Agile. There are many more. So Kanban is one of those. Let's see, extreme programming, DSDM. There's a method called Crystal. There's a bunch of others. For insights about that, there's something called the State of Agile report that comes out every spring by a company called Version 1. It is a free PDF that you can download. So if you Google Version 1 State of Agile annual report, you will probably find the one from 2022. The one from 2023 should be coming out in a few months. And it says which methods of Agile are used. It also talks about the benefits of using Agile. And what's great about that is if you're trying to get your organization to get buy-in to use Agile methods, it's going to be a great support for you to do that. Okay, so let's see. So what else is Agile? Well, principles that guide development. Most importantly, it's a culture shift. So a lot of times people also think Agile is a bunch of tools, and really it's a shift. It's a shift in mindset. The way that you do things, the way that you look at things is very, very different. So if you want to get your organization to use Agile, it's probably going to take a bit of a shift. And that's actually the biggest area that I see challenges as a consultant, is helping the organization shift the way they do projects from a more directive, delegative style to a more facilitative style, where everybody on the team engages and takes part in planning and in execution. Agile is a great solution for some types of projects, but not for all. So for example, if you are paving a driveway, it would be a project. However, doing it in an Agile way probably doesn't make sense, because the scope is clear and it's something you've done before if you're, have a company that does paving of driveways. So it would probably make it take longer, probably slow it down. So if you have a project where the scope is well known, using Agile can actually make it go slower. People don't talk about that often. I am an Agilist, but I am not a I'm not a Scrumdamentalist. Okay, so that would be like a person who has fundamentals in Scrum that says, if you're not using Scrum, then you're doing it wrong. I've never been that way. When I learned Agile, I thought, wow, this is a great tool for my toolbox. And then I proceeded to learn some different methods in Agile, so I can have those different tools for different times. I didn't get rid of traditional project management. I do also implement hybrid project management. Myself and my colleague, Mark Tolbert, he's from the DC area and former leadership in the PMI WDC chapter. He and I wrote a book together called Hybrid Project Management. We talk about how you can use traditional and Agile together. So if you have any interest in that, I'll share a little bit about my book later. You can find it on Amazon too. And we also teach a class on that. So basically, learning Agile does not mean getting rid of traditional by any means. I am not of that mindset. So Agile also entails open communication between teams, stakeholders, and customers, and is definitely a different approach from traditional. So why would we use Agile? I love my image for agility is the hang glider over here. I've actually done a little hang gliding myself. If you're interested in doing it, you do not have to know anything. You can take an introductory class. They're offered in a number of places. My favorite place to go is Jockey's Ridge in North Carolina, the Outer Banks, Nags Head area, and there's some nice soft dunes. So if you don't stick your landing, you're at least landing in sand, which is nice and soft. What I love about hang gliding and agility is it's really a great example of it. So when you to get the hang glider moving, you have to start running to get the right wind velocity over the sail that you see there, the big the delta triangle here. That's basically the wing, and you need the right airspeed to get it to lift, much like flying a kite while being in it. So that takes agility. So when you start off, the wind might be flying in a certain direction, blowing at you in a certain direction. If the wind shifts, you need to shift to adapt to that. For those of you who fly, I don't know if you knew this, but you always take off into the wind. It may seem counterintuitive. You're like, oh, wouldn't it be better if the wind's at your back? There's actually more stability if you take off into the wind. Also, you get lift on your plane or your hang glider, which both operate the same way. You get more lift if the wind is blowing into the front of it, because it actually increases the wind speed over the wings, which actually gives you lift and makes you fly. Super important in a hang glider because you are not propelled by anything, but even important in an airplane because, like I said, there's more stability if you take off into the wind. So agility, we need to adapt to changing conditions. So when you take off in your hang glider, things could be different than it was a few moments before you took off. As you start to fly, things can change. So I love this image of agility. If you're interested in learning more about hang gliding, you can also message me about that. I'd love to talk about that. So Agile principles and practices are used to manage change, improve communication, reduce cost, especially the cost associated with changes. As far as improving communications, we really focus on open communication. This is not just between team members, but also stakeholders and customers. Also keeping in mind reduce cost, that for product and process waste, there are plenty of places where there could be waste. And in Agile, we're going to learn about, by applying Agile concepts, we learn about where value is, and we look for waste and remove it, and that helps reduce cost. There's also increased efficiency and providing value to customers and stakeholders, and decreasing our project risk, particularly risk associated with scope. There's a question here. I'm going to go ahead and answer that at the end. But if you do have a question on a specific slide, you can go ahead and note it. And if I can, if I see it and can check into it, I will. But I do like the question that was provided, and I will reply to that at the end. So when do you want to use Agile? Consider using an Agile approach when one or more of the following conditions are present. I like these because it's a simple list of 4 items: uncertainty, complexity, innovation, and urgency. So uncertainty, particularly in requirements and changing conditions. So this is scope uncertainty in particular. If there is a lot of that, or you know there will be scope uncertainty or scope changes, then Agile could be the right approach to use instead of using a traditional approach. If there's a high level of complexity, this could be in the content, integration. So perhaps I'm creating a product that then integrates with another product. Maybe there's another project going on at the same time that I need to communicate with. There could be complexity in stakeholder management into the number of stakeholders or the complexity of the stakeholder list. Also a complex solution. So things like NASA or you know, other technology-driven things where there's a lot of complexity. Innovation. Anytime there's a new technology or there's content or a system that's new, that's where innovation is going to be very prevalent. And when there's innovation, there's going to be uncertainty. So you can think of those as going together. So uncertainty is basically risk. And anytime we're doing something new, we have more risk, we have more uncertainty. So these kind of go hand in hand. And then the last is urgency. So if we have something that has a high priority and a short timeline, I'll give an example of this. A lot of times people think of using Agile for IT projects. I actually use Agile to do course development. I'm actually working on a course development right now for one of the universities that I work at. And actually, just right before getting on here, I got a message asking a question about the development we're doing. So one time I had to update a course, and I had started with that project about a week or 2 before the course went live. That did not give me much time. So this was a 14-week class, and it had already been running, but needed to be updated. Every week of it needed to be updated. So what I did in order to meet this urgency is I used an Agile approach, and I did the work incrementally. So Agile could be incremental or it could be iterative. So incremental means I take this big project and I break it into pieces. Well, with a 14-week class, I can look at it as 14 pieces. And so what I did is I did the first 2, I think it was at least 2 weeks of class, maybe 3. I developed those before the class went live. And then after the class went live, I continued to do the rest of the development. Now, I was making no changes to the course objectives or anything major like that, but I was making massive changes to the course content, including weekly discussion questions and things of that sort, even some changes to the assignments. So what I was able to do is keep the course syllabus the same that said, you know, you have an assignment week 3, you have an assignment week 5, but I was able to update those assignments. I was able to update the content. And by the time we got to probably about week 5 or 6, I had updated the whole 14-week course. But at the start of the course, I had only updated the first 2 or 3 weeks. So literally, value could be obtained in those first few weeks without me doing the whole project. For a traditional project, it would work very differently. In a traditional project, if I was doing a course update, I might do the update in such a way that, okay, let me update all the assignments for the 14 weeks. Let me update all of the discussions for the 14 weeks. Now let me update all of the course readings for the 14 weeks. But by doing an Agile approach, where I was doing it in increments, I actually took the increment based on when the course weeks would actually go live, and each week a new week of the course would go live, and I did my development that way. When you're doing course development, you can do it either way. You could do it week by week development, or you could do it across the board. And what I tend to do is I tend to do a roadmap across the board that says, you know, here's all of the weeks and what we're going to cover in each week, sort of the high level view, when I'm going to have assignments, things like that. And then in the more detailed work, I do the work incrementally using an Agile approach week by week. And so that's an example of how you can use Agile and literally gain value before the project is done. You wouldn't do that in traditional. So that's what urgency looks like. So we can actually start to use things for the project before the project's done, and that's really not the approach used for traditional. So that would be a great example. This is my favorite diagram for comparing traditional to Agile. So in traditional, and this is all the background to just get you in the frame of mind for Agile versus traditional, and then I'm going to dive into how I actually practically use this in my everyday life. Literally in the background right now, I have my Kanban board with my priorities on what I'm going to work on this week and today, etc. So we have our traditional project approach, and here we have the fixed scope. So for example, the course development. So I know what it is. It's a 14-week course, and the course is on, let's say, an introduction to Agile project management, and I know that scope. I then take what I know about the scope and figure out how long is it going to take me to do this project and how much is it going to cost. You know, the cost is based on any resources, either people or material. We call this plan driven, okay, because we actually come up with a plan in the beginning. We come up with a plan based on this fixed scope. We estimate our cost and schedule based on the requirements that are fixed or the scope being fixed. Okay, so if the requirements are fixed, the scope is the work that we're doing to deliver on those requirements. Requirements come from the customer, scope comes from the team doing the development. Now, let's take a look at Agile. What does Agile look like? Well, an Agile or adaptive approach is value driven. Okay, and what we mean by that is we have a fixed period of time and a fixed cost. So what this might look like is our iterations last for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, actually could be more. If it's a Scrum project, it's 1 to 4 weeks. If it's another type of Agile project, it could be 2 months or more. But I would say in general, usually the time frame is about 2 to 4 weeks. And let's say we have a 2-week time frame and we have 3 people working on it. So our cost would be determined by the number of resources working on it and the period of time. And we have the incremental period of time, and then we have the overall project. So let's say the project is 6 months long. We have 3 people working on it, and we have increments of 2 weeks. So we're going to, we call these iterations. So in each iteration, we would deliver some product. What would we do is our scope. So we have our schedule and our cost fixed, and then we estimate our scope. So we flip this triangle around, and that makes all the difference in the world. So you can see why we would want to do this. If our scope is likely to change, we don't want to plan everything out in the beginning, because then we're just going to have to keep changing that plan. But instead, we can fix we know we have this many people, we know we have this duration for the project, and we're going to break it down into 2-week iterations, and each of those 2 weeks we're going to figure out what we're going to do in those 2 weeks. So it allows us to basically prioritize, reprioritize, change the scope, add to the scope, all of those things. And you'll see how beautifully this works with Kanban in a moment here. So I love that diagram. And by the way, if you do want a copy of these slides, I can send you a PDF. Just shoot me an email after the session today. So Kanban, the Kanban method, a little bit about it. So Kanban is a Japanese word for signal, and it has a defined workflow. So signal being our task board, our Kanban board, allows us gives us signals about what we're doing, what work is happening, and when. So there's a defined workflow. You may see plan, do, check, done, or plan, work in progress, test, done, or validate or verify, done. There's always at least a plan, doing, and done at bare minimum on a Kanban board. And I always like to have some sort of check or test or something like that, whether it's a peer review or a customer review or something like that, before it's actually done. So our work comes from the product backlog. So if you're not familiar with this, product backlog is basically just a list of requirements. And in Agile, you can update that throughout the whole project. It's not just at the beginning of the project, it's throughout the project you can add to the product backlog. And you also want to reprioritize it. And work goes through the workflow. And the idea in Kanban is to limit the work in progress. So I'm sure you're familiar with this, like you're working on 10 things and you're not getting anything done. So Kanban, the focus of Kanban is says, okay, you have 10 things to do, prioritize them, work on no more than 1 or 2 at once. And depending on how many people are on your team, obviously, but focus on doing that, getting it done, getting it through the workflow, and then pick the next thing to do by priority. And that will really, really, really help you be focused and accomplish a lot more. Okay, so the Kanban methods helps teams manage their work. It also helps individuals manage their work, which is how I'm going to show you how I use it. It provides visibility to progress. So not just for yourself, but for stakeholders. They can look at your Kanban board, see where you're at, see what your progress is, what you've done, what you have left to do, etc. It helps you measure cycle time. Cycle time is how long it takes from when you start to work on something to when you finish working on it. So that's really important. Also has you focus on doing things correctly. So it's gives you an added focus or attention, and it limits the number of working tasks. Like I said, we want to complete more things, but work on less things at once. And actually, one of my colleagues was talking to me one time and saying he unitasks. So if you're curious about it, do a Google search on unitasking. So what people are finding is all of this multitasking is just making us take longer to accomplish everything. So now the focus is on unitasking. So unitasking basically saying, hey, let me focus on this one thing, get it done, and then do the next thing, rather than trying to do everything all at once. Much of our multitasking is really multi-threading. We're not doing 2 things at once. We're switching back and forth from one to another. And in Agile, we say, there can be a lot of waste when you're switching back and forth between things. So we want to try to focus on one thing. Okay, so this is what a basic Kanban board looks like. We have our list of tasks here, which we want to prioritize, what ones we're working on. In this case, I don't particularly show it that way. The X's show what's in the backlog. So in this case, forms is in the backlog. Report should also be marked as in the backlog, because it's not, basically anything's in the backlog if it's not in progress, testing or validating or done. So in this case, this database design task has been done. The login page is being tested, so it was worked on, but it's not done yet. It's not done until after testing. The user profile part of this project is being worked on, and forms are in the backlog. And like I said, report should also be marked in the backlog. Okay, so what are some pros of the Kanban method? And I'll show you some more examples too. So I think pictures are 1,000 words. So pros of the Kanban method: it helps you to reduce delivery time, improves your flow of work, reduce the number of simultaneous tasks, so you're working more efficiently if you're not shifting between one task and the other. It's simple to understand and implement. Another great thing about it, Kanban can be used with a team of any size, including an individual can use it. So I use it for myself, and I also use it when I work in teams. I rarely have a team where there's 5 people or 5 to 9 people that are dedicated and only working on that one project and not doing anything else. And that if I have that situation, then Scrum would be best. And I've led Scrum teams and worked on Scrum teams, but much of the work I do now, because I have many different jobs and roles and titles and responsibilities, Scrum doesn't work for that, because they're not all correlated together. I still have a list of all my tasks to do, but my tasks don't necessarily make sense with one another. They're from different projects and different commitments that I have. So it allows me, Kanban allows me to do that. Some cons, it's less effective in shared resource situations. So yes, if you have a dedicated team of 5 people, it could be less effective to use the Kanban method than some other methods. It also doesn't support surges in demand or high variability in product. So for example, if let's say you have 3 people working and you're using Kanban, and now you have a bunch more requests, a bunch more tasks that are needed. If you only have 3 people, you can't easily support adding more people. Basically things just get queued up and prioritized. And so if there's a high demand, people end up just having to wait. I think of Kanban as almost like a little manufacturing. We have a start here, and then we move through, we work on things, we test things, we complete things, and then we go to the next thing. And so it's almost like a little production line. I think of it that way. So how do we use Kanban? What is it best used for? It works well when there's a stable, repetitive development in place. So it's great for teams or individuals that have many incoming requests or tasks which vary in priority or in effort or size. And that is perfect for my life, for the things I do. So this is an example of a Kanban board that I used for one project. And it shows, I used priority here, which I don't have a priority 1 listed here, but I sometimes I use priority, sometimes I don't, meaning like if I have a lot of items, I don't prioritize all of them 1 through N, because that could be wasting time. I often just prioritize the first 5 or 10, depending on how many people are working on it. I have size. I think that's a really important factor, is how big is this task? Is it small? Is it medium? Is it large? I just do that relative sizing. I don't spend a lot of effort on hours and things like that. That's also a Kanban approach, that we don't want to spend too much time on estimating. I also look at risk. If you've seen me do presentations before, most of my presentations are on risk. Agile, and I do a little bit on leadership, servant leadership, and grateful leadership, which actually play into Agile. So I'm always thinking about risk, even in Agile, especially in Agile. We're using an Agile method because we have a high level of uncertainty around scope. So we want to look at each of these tasks and see what is the fundamental risk, like what's the level of the uncertainty. So for example, this task has a low level of uncertainty, this one has medium. A task with a high level of uncertainty would be something I haven't done before, the team hasn't done before, don't know much about, so there's a lot of uncertainty around it. I use this task number to just do an overall tracking of tasks. So this is a larger project, so I was up in the 80-something tasks here. This lists the tasks themselves, and I like to put a plan date. So if there's a particular milestone date when it needs to get done by, that may not be, you know, how everybody does it, but I will say for me, this works really well because this plan date is going to help me to prioritize. I usually prioritize my tasks based on a combination of the size, the risk, and the planned due date, right? So if it is small and it is due soon and it is low risk, that is going to be a high priority, because, you know, I drive by planned date, but if something's small and low risk, I can get it out of the way and just get it done. We call that like low hanging fruit. Sometimes you might want to actually do things with higher risk first, because if there's a large amount of uncertainty, you might want to address it sooner than later, because if you address it later, it could have like bigger effects, like a snowballing effect. Or sometimes if a risk is high, but you know if you wait a week or two, you'll have more information and that the uncertainty will be reduced, then you may want to address it later. So when they talk about an Agile, a risk-adjusted backlog, that's what that is. It's using risk to adjust your priority in your product backlog. So this part over here, the tasks, the priority, the size, and the risk, all this task information here is really basically your backlog. Now you might have a separate backlog sheet and then pull things onto your Kanban board, or you may just use your Kanban board as your backlog, like, and just prioritize everything on the board. I caution you with that. If you do that, do not prioritize. If you have 50 items, do not prioritize 1 to 50. I'd prioritize the top 5 or no more than the top 10, because you'll end up spending too much time prioritizing. So then work in progress would be when you start doing the work. Test or review is when you've completed it and somebody else is doing some evaluation or looking at it. You may also have like an update. In this case, you know, working with other people, they would review it, they give me feedback, I would update, or they would do so. And then I used a color code here. Says my colleague Stacy things she was working on, and then my name things I was working on, and I used color coding for that. So you can see the things I was doing, and then you can also see I was testing and reviewing these 2 things for her. So I used purple for me and orange for her. The color coding is kind of nice for that, and I'll show you another color coding usage in another example also in a moment. So this is an example product backlog. So what I have is I have release, priority, tasks, and task number and tasks. And here again, I can use sizing and risk. I also use subtasks here. This is all one spreadsheet, but I broke it up so you can read it. So basically this over here follows along to this down here. Okay, so, and I have the resource, who's working on it. So that's what I do for my product backlogs, but you know, this just an example. You can always Google search images for things like product backlogs or release plans and see what they look like. This is an example project release plan. And so what I did is I showed like themes. So for example, here is the first theme was risk management education for the organization. The second theme was was a continuation of risk management education for the organization. You don't see the distinction here, but there are some other information that was part of this. There was basically phases of that education. And then the third theme here is reporting and thresholds. So there were a number of high-level tasks, or these might be epics, which are basically like large user stories, or user stories, smaller demarcations. User stories basically just a requirement, and tasks are the things you do to help support that requirement. So this is a little bit of a roadmap, basically, for when things are going to get done. And you can use this also, for a specific project. I don't use that for all the tasks that I manage, but I do use it for specific projects. So I'll have a roadmap for a project or for a product, but I won't have one for all of the different things I do. I don't necessarily have a roadmap for that. So a little bit of a summary here, and then I'm going to show you. Oh, I don't have the other example here. Okay, so I can explain it to you all. The example, I realized I cut out my example with my task because I had like too many different random things on there. I thought it was too challenging to share. So what I do for my task for myself, I actually color code. So instead of color coding by person, because they're all just for me, I color code by group, by like organization I'm supporting. So I'll color code for a specific client, color code for example, like university work that I'm doing. I have a color code for each university that I'm doing work for. That's actually fun with universities. I use colors like for UVA. UVA has orange and blue, I believe. Yeah, orange and blue for colors. I use orange for UVA stuff. I teach at Post University. Their colors are purple and orange, so I use purple to distinguish that. George Mason University, I use green, and Montclair State University, I use red. So I actually use my school colors because I figure it's an easy way to do it. What I do for clients is if they have a particular color associated, like with their logo for that specific client, blue or green or whatever, I use that. And for the most part, I've been pretty good with that. If there's something general I'm working on that's for me, I'll use gray often, just because I'm like, well, that color's not taken by somebody else. But that's kind of how I do it. I color code. There's certainly enough colors that you can use that. If you're not a color person, you can use like letters of the alphabet, or you can use like a little acronym like UVA or Post University or whatever the name of the company is or client. I also do federal government contract work, so federal agency work, and I do some color coding there too. And basically, what I will tell you is how I actually made tremendous value with this. So I've been teaching Kanban for many, many, many years, and I've used it for projects here and there and that kind of thing. But I really got in a jam with a bunch of things that I was doing. As I said, I teach at 4 universities. Last year, at the beginning of the year, I was on a full-time federal contract, working for a company that does federal contract work. And I've done that type of work for decades now, actually. And I was working on that project. I was teaching at the beginning of the year in the spring semester. I was teaching 4 classes. So just to give you an understanding, if you don't teach, each class is considered about 10 hours of work a week. So if you teach 4 classes, that is a full-time job. That's 40 hours a week. So I had 4 classes I was teaching. I was on a 40-hour-a-week contract, which was time and materials. So I had to work 40 hours. I had to actually bill in 40 hours. So that's 80 hours. Plus, I was working on a number of other projects with my consulting business. I was working on some projects with my colleague, Mark, doing some development courses. And I was also continuing to work on a book, which I have to say, my work was a little bit slow on that. And at the same time, I also taught PMP classes, PMI ACP, PMI RMP, the ACPs for Agile, the RMPs for Risk. And in those times, I literally would have to take time off of my 40 hours a week to do that. Oftentimes, classes would be nights or weekends. So I figured out that I was probably working 100 hours a week. And if you don't know what 100 hours a week looks like, it looks like you start work at 7, you eat lunch while working, you stop for dinner if you know, you have a spouse that would like to eat with you, which mine does. And also I gotta feed the dogs and walk the dogs. So I would stop at dinner, and then I would get back on and I would work until basically I fell asleep in front of the computer screen, which is about 11:30 or 12. And I would do that pretty much every day. Saturday and Sunday would be a little bit lighter. I might start work around 9 instead of 7. But it's pretty harsh. And so by the end of the year, I realized like this was like a lot. So actually I shifted things around. I quit the 40-hour week job. I'd gotten a contract with my company to do some other contract work. So that really helped me greatly to be able to do that and to do some teaching. And so I've basically cut it back to probably 60 to 80 hours. That's still a lot of work. So in the month of December, I had many projects that I was working on. And I said to myself, I've got to really drive this, and I've really got to prioritize what I'm doing and stay above water. I was reviewing a book for a colleague of mine on risk management. I was developing, it was either 3 or 4 courses I was doing development on. Plus I had some teaching obligations at UVA. I was working on a contract with requirements. I was working on another contract for a pharmaceutical company, doing some consultative and training type of work for them. So I completed, I think it was 6 or 7 projects in the month of December. And there was zero way that I would have done that and done it well and met my deadlines if I had not used this method. So I literally every week would plan out, what am I going to do this week? I would do it based on, you know, I prioritized based on when things were due. Like I said, I used the color coding, and I would just go through my tasks. I mean, each of these projects I was working on had different tasks every week, and I would go through my tasks. I would prioritize and reprioritize, work through them. And, you know, every time I complete it, I'd put done. I have a filter on that would remove my done, so I'd only see the things left to do. And I just got so much stuff done. And so since then, I was like, I got to use this for everything. Like I said, I'd used it before. I've used it for projects, but I was just using it for everything and anything that was on my plate. And to this day, right now, I have things that are due today and tomorrow, 2 or 3 things that are due. I have a class that's starting up on Wednesday. I'm teaching 2 classes. I still have a consulting engagement, a requirements analysis engagement that I'm working on. I have some course developments I'm working on. I did finish my book review. We finished ahead of schedule, so that was great. But I prioritize all these, and I use the sizing, I use risk, I use the milestone date or the due date. And in doing all that, if I see a conflict, I can go back to somebody and say, hey, I can't get this to you this week. I can do it next week. So if something was requested of me this week and I knew I wouldn't be able to do it, so it's now going to be next week. So really, this really works for somebody that's got a lot of stuff going on, and that includes, you know, personal stuff and work stuff, everything you can use Kanban for. One of my colleagues uses it with her children to do cleaning chores around the house. So she lists like all the chores, and then she actually uses sticky notes. That's like the traditional way of doing it. You have a sticky note with the task, and you actually move it across the board. I've transformed that into a spreadsheet just so I can have it electronically. But you can do this on paper. I've seen people do it with whiteboards where they just say plan, work in progress, check, done. And they have a column for each, and they move the sticky note for the task as it goes through each of those. I like that. It's a great visual way, but because I'm in different rooms in the house and doing different things and I have different laptops for different work that I do. I just find the spreadsheet works the best for me. So if you're interested in a copy of my spreadsheet, you can also email me and I will share that with you. So this is basically a summary of this. So hopefully you have a feel now for the Kanban board and how to use it. It's really pretty easy. Another thing I'll note, if you're interested in an electronic version, there is a electronic version that's free. It's called Trello. You set up an account, and I didn't want to get into Trello for this presentation, but I actually have some boards I do in Trello. What I find Trello useful for is if I'm working with a bunch of other people, so we can all look at the same board at once. But for myself, I like the spreadsheet because I just keep it up in the background on my laptop. It's in the background right now and it has everything prioritized. I don't have to go to a site to get to it. Trello is great when I've worked with teams where I have other people and we all need to look at what we're doing at once. If you're not sure how to use Trello, super easy. Go to YouTube. How do I use Trello? You'll find a whole bunch of intro videos for Trello. Really easy to use, free, great. Only negative is that your information's in the cloud. It's not protected. For the contract work that I do, I can't use Trello because it needs to be, secured. It needs to be through the client's software. So I tend to not use Trello for those types of projects. Hopefully this is giving you appreciation for Kanban. I say the word Kanban different than Susan Soul does, if you didn't notice. And I think she used Kanban. I don't know which one is right. So
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Silly.
I might be wrong. I just call it Kanban. But one of the people I worked with did not want to use Agile or anything like that. I introduced the Kanban board. I just called it a task board. And we were using it for months. And I said something about using Agile. And he's like, oh, I don't know anything about Agile. I was like, well, you've been using it. What are you talking about? The task board. What do you mean? I was like, well, it's the Kanban board. What? Kanban? I don't know what Kanban. I can't do that. I don't know anything about Agile. I'm like, you've been using it. Like, so sometimes people are like fearful about Agile. Using the Kanban board or task board is a great way to introduce them to it. I basically used Agile for one of my federal projects without the government knowing we were using Agile by just using the task board. And I realized we had to because literally every week, sometimes every day, they would change the priority of stuff we were supposed to be working on. So it gave us a way to say, hey, here's all the tasks you've given us. Here's the priority. Here's what we're working on. And if they changed it the next day, we could roll with it. Using a traditional method would not have worked at all. And it was really, really great. It was great to use for communication with stakeholders. It was transparent, all of those things. So hopefully you have some motivation to use this should say use Kanban or use a Kanban board. So sorry about that. So motivation to use a Kanban board and just get lots of stuff done. I was like, in December, I was just like, every day I was like, I just want to get stuff done, or the other S word. And that was my big thing through December, because the last few weeks in December, I wanted to take some time off. And I did work a little bit on one of my contracts, but for the most part, I took some nice time at the end of the year, and I felt like I could do it because I just got a lot done. So plan it, work it, and do it. That is my summary today. So if you're interested in Kanban or in any other Agile method or risk management, incorporate it with Agile, go ahead and join my Agile risk management group. If you want to join and you can't find it in the groups in LinkedIn, just shoot me a message in LinkedIn. You can find me, Susan Parente. I think I show up as being in the DC area. I'm actually in Delaware, but I do work in DC and the New York area. So unfortunately, I can't pick both. So I just picked the DC area. If you find my profile, it has a bridge in the background. It's actually the new New York bridge. And I love the background in mechanical engineering. I love bridges. And my thing is about being a bridge for people, for professionals. And I think that works with the consulting work I do and the teaching work. So go ahead and find me and type a little note, say, hey, I was at your presentation, so I know who you are. Okay, so and I'll connect with you on LinkedIn, and then tell me I want to be in your group, and I'll go add you as a member. So if you're interested in learning more about Agile project management, in particular hybrid, how do we use Agile with traditional at the same time? This is the book that my colleague and I wrote, Mark Tolbert and I. You can find it on Amazon. You can also just reach out to me. I will, if you purchase a book from me, I will sign a copy and mail it to you directly. So that's kind of nice if you don't want to go through Amazon, and I will do so at a reasonable price to you. So so if you want to do it that way, that's a great way to do it. Okay, so I think that's all for that, and now we can hit some questions here. So I try to look at questions as I'm going, but sometimes that can be challenging. So I saw there was one good question early on. So Michael Martell asks, if it is not possible to have releases, therefore early value, and the go live must be in a big bang fashion, is there a real point to utilizing a Scrum approach? So I guess what you're saying is you're not able to have like incremental releases of product and only deliver at the end. Is there a point of using the Scrum approach? Yes, I still think it's valuable if your scope is changing, because if not, you may focus on things that are not in the end the highest priority. So even if you don't release incrementally, so at the end of each iteration, we have a potential releasable product. That doesn't mean that we release it. Not all organizations want a new release every 2 weeks. So it's an excellent question that you're asking. You still would want a Scrum approach if your priorities are going to change, if your scope and your priorities, if your scope are going to change, because even if you wait till the end of the 6 months to deliver that product, you still want to make sure that product has the highest priorities. And so that's the important part there. So very good question though. And then Ty Gonzalez says, example Kanban board, how does the product owner get involved in the prioritization of tasks, or is this set by a stakeholder, PM or other? Okay, so in the case of me using Kanban for myself, I'm the one that's setting the priority, because I know what all my different clients' priorities are, and so I'm really setting that. I may get some priority from each client, but I also have to look at my 80 hours a week or 60 hours a week, whatever time I have, and I have to look at how am I going to spend that time. And obviously, all of my clients are important. I'm not going to say to one of them, oh, I'm working on that. You're priority number 5. Like, I don't tell them that. I just tell them that thing that you want is priority number 1 for you. And I'm focused on that. And here's when I can get it done. So in the case of if you're working using Kanban for a particular project, then yes, the product owner or some other customer representative would be prioritizing the items in the product backlog. In the case of me, for all the work that I have to do, I end up prioritizing it, but I prioritize it based on what my stakeholder needs are for a variety of projects. And I wanted to share my example, because even if you're just working on one project, you could have competing things that you're doing. You could be doing house renovations. Like last week, we were having our HVAC replaced upstairs, and I had to schedule that, along with I've got to remove Christmas decorations, along with I have work to do, along with my new classes are starting. I started 2 classes last week that I'm teaching. And so, you can really use Kanban to manage all of these variety of things, both work and home things. Are there any other questions? In a fairly PM immature organization with functional structure trying to normalize PM concepts, how would you recommend Kanban use to department administrators, department admins? So first of all, Kanban is a nice way to get your toe in the water of Agile. It's not a huge commitment. Like I said, I've used task boards for organizations that I never got agreement. Hey, we're going to use an agile approach. What do you think? Because people are like, oh my gosh, you've got to train everybody and put all the structure in place. No, just create a task board. What are the things we need to do? What are the requirements? What are the priorities? What are the tasks? What are the priorities? Who's going to do what? Again, you can do this board actually like on a whiteboard with stickies. This is another thing. You can Google Kanban board, example Kanban board. And when you Google that, click on images and you'll see a lot of different images for a Kanban board. That is my best recommendation for just seeing like what different ones look like, what one might be best for you. Traditionally, it's done with sticky notes, but when we got to be virtual, people started using things like spreadsheets. If you look at Trello, and again, you can watch a YouTube video on Trello, there's cards and you can actually grab a card and move it from plan to work in progress to testing to done. And so Trello is meant to kind of be very similar to that. What I do in the spreadsheet is I actually just change the data across the cells. So it's very rudimentary. I like to teach the spreadsheet one because I hate to be tool dependent. I don't want anyone to think you have to have like Jira in order to do this. Jira uses a task board too. It's a lot more complicated than Trello is. So that's what I would say is have, each of these departments have their own task board and prioritize things, and then put that task board someplace where it's transparent so other people can see it and know what tasks are being worked on by whom. So in the case of the sticky note, I would have my name on the task that I'm working on, or sometimes you'll see it as like swim lanes where it's like, my name here, Susan, and then all the things that I'm working on and where those tasks are at, and then other people's names for their tasks. That's how it looks in Jira, if you use Jira. So yeah, I mean, go ahead and give it a shot. I would say when you want to start with people, use people who, to do like a proof of concept with, who are easygoing, like new stuff, things like that. Don't pick the person who's like the tree hugger to try to do it, who doesn't want to change how they're doing things. Pick somebody who's more adaptive and interested in trying new and different things. And you don't have to make a big deal out of it. Just use it to do your work. Use it to communicate what you're working on. That's the real important thing. Don't wait for that buy-in. We all manage our tasks in different ways. I've never had somebody tell me I can't use a task board to manage my tasks. They might say, I don't want it reported to me that way, or they might have some other, preference, but nobody's going to say you can't use a task board to manage your work. Anybody can do this for anything you're doing. And I also think it does make it easier to communicate the work that you're doing and what you've accomplished. I can do all sorts of sorts and things like that to just, figure out, how much I've accomplished, what is my throughput, what is my cycle time. I can do all those things with the information I have. Instead of marking done, if I put the date that I finished it, I can track some of that. If you use Trello, you can do some more tracking of cycle time. That's even better. But start with the spreadsheet and go from there. So great question, Belinda. You're welcome, Markian. And you're welcome, Belinda. And if anyone else has questions, follow up. The one thing I don't like about the chat questions is that I don't get to dig a little bit deeper and find out a little bit more about things. So I'm kind of answering from what I know.
Susan, always a pleasure. Thank you for taking your time to present with us.
Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, please do follow up with me. Find me on LinkedIn and let me know if you have any interest in certifications or my book. Those are the things I'm passionate about. So thank you for this opportunity and for giving me your lunchtime. I appreciate it.